He's lying, and I'm gonna find out why.
These videos are not for children. If you're a children, then piss off.
Hey there, it's me, your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso. And usually this is where I'd put some creative opening. But today, I don't have to, because I'm talking about Batman the Animated Series. A show that really speaks for itself. Yet despite that, I'm gonna go ahead and talk about it anyway. A series that is so great that calling it great doesn't do it justice. It's a total understatement. For many, this show was their first introduction to the Dark Knight and the city he protects. This was a lot of people's first time ever seeing Batman, Robin, the Joker, the Sewer King, all of the classics. And even if it wasn't their first impression, it still wound up becoming a lot of other people's favorite interpretations of the Caped Crusader, and all of Gotham. For so many Batman fans, this is the go-to in Batman quality. This is the unattainable goal that so many other iterations of this universe are held up to. This is the brand's pedestal. So naturally I wanted to make a video on it and highlight what made it so great. We're talking a full retrospective of the show. I wanted to piece together something really special to show why this show is so special. A full retrospective, with cameos from some of the cast themselves, and some other familiar faces you might know. But I decided before I wanted to talk about what made this show great as a whole, before I started talking about the big picture here, before I drop an over an hour long video, let's first examine this under the microscope. Before we get into what made this series so iconic on its own, we're gonna first take a look at the show episode by episode and dissect what made these individual episodes so great, one by one. And don't get me wrong, not all of them are winners, but most of them are. And I kinda think it makes it that much more interesting to examine the ones that aren't. So without any further ado, thank you for joining me in what is known as Please hold all questions until after the credits. So of course, we're starting at the best place to start for almost any story, the beginning. And I gotta tell you, this intro alone sends me down memory lane. Those few frames that start the opening are an instant nostalgia trip for me. From how smooth the animation is to how incredible the accompanying track is to it. I was impressed by it when I was younger, and I'm still in awe of it now that I'm old. And you know what? I'm genuinely offended that platforms are even allowed to question if you want to skip this. No, take that away. This should be a mandatory part of your viewing experience when watching this show. If you skip the intro to Batman the Animated Series, are you even a Batman fan? I don't know. Legally, I don't think you are. And not just the intro, but the title cards alone are a work of art. I know, we haven't even gotten into the episode yet, but man, I miss these. They made the episodes feel much more grandiose, opening each episode up with well-drawn, vague artwork that perfectly represents and only subtly alludes to the episode that we're watching was an amazing call. I don't know how else to explain it other than to say that the presentation made it feel like you were watching something that was a big deal. This isn't some throwaway episode you could miss. This was on leather wings. I don't know, I felt like the title cards made each episode feel more like an event. They were a nice little introductory taste of what was to come. And these might be the parts that are often overlooked, but that's part of the reason I'm bringing them up. It's so easy to take so much of the show for granted when it's throwing so much greatness at you. And that's why I think it's important to highlight these things, because even the little things are pretty incredible here. Now on to the actual episode. There's a giant bat allegedly roaming the skies of Gotham, terrorizing the city, and stealing from pharmaceutical companies. This gargantuan gargoyle leaves a host of injured victims in his wake, with no one really being able to fully ID this creature. Without proper evidence, there's a good portion of the GCPD who blame the city's nighttime vigilante for these heinous acts. So of course Batman looks to clear his name, which is really just an extra addition to the story, because it's not like if this guy was a giant dragon-like creature of some kind, Batman wouldn't get involved. Well, like, he'd probably still actively look into it, even if he wasn't trying to clear his name. Now right off the bat, yeah, I know. I want to say this episode is fairly simplistic. It's not the deepest episode of the season, and at first glance, it might seem so shallow that you could stand in it and not get wet. But in actuality, if you were attempting to do that, you might want to bring your floaties, because appearances can be very deceiving. While this still is a very condensed and contained story, it still did a fair amount of world building. The episode not only explains its own plot, but also explains a lot of the show's premise to its audience authentically. Narratively, the inclusion of Harvey Dent doesn't really serve the plot in any way, shape, or form, but his inclusion does make sense to the story, and it does introduce the character and their place in the overall story to the viewer. This is of course just an example. The show tells us a lot by telling us little in passing. Every scene seems like it was done with intent purpose. Having Alfred and Batman chat over the current events could seem like a throwaway scene at first, but in the scene, the viewer gets a first look at the Batcave, gains insight to what Bruce and Alfred's relationship is like, alerts Batman to the existence of the episode's main antagonist, and it lets us know that Bruce is a playboy when Alfred mentions calling and canceling on whatever woman he was seeing at the time. It fills the viewer in on all of that, and it does so in a way that feels natural, and it's still providing the audience exposition without making it feel like that's what it's doing. These details paint a picture without letting the canvas even know about the brush. This impresses me even more when considering the rest of the series. The first episode did what pilots are supposed to do, set the tone for what's to come. But not every first episode of a series succeeds in doing that, because shows are subject to change. And a lot of the time, what the show starts off as is not what the show ends up being. But with Batman the Animated Series, it's almost like the path was clear from day one. And it's outstanding that they had a working design and narrative at the start of their vision, and managed to see it all the way through. Not changing it, but instead gradually evolving it with time. There are so many more aspects of this first episode that hold up than don't. And in terms of the episode itself, the idea of having Batman take on Mad Bat in episode 1 is kind of brilliant. For starters, it lends to great visuals. Seeing these two titans soar and brawl through the sky is some awesomely action-packed and entertaining stuff. And having these two characters interact is a great way to compare and contrast. The show opens up and shows you who Batman is and what he isn't. There's no confusion going into this. You're not seeing a half-man, half-bat-like creature. You're seeing a full man in a half-bat mask. So, if that was a concern of yours, worry no more. In all seriousness, it's a really inspired idea to juxtapose these two characters. Because we see that despite the persona of being a bat, Bruce Wayne is still very much a man. No matter what mask he wears, he's still mortal and still in mortal danger anytime he comes up against one of these baddies. Whereas the foes he goes against are typically not mortal men. And therefore it's usually Batman in more danger than his opponent would be. The setup also allows the audience to learn where these characters' morals and allegiances lie. We learn pretty quickly that Bullock is not a fan nor a friend of the Bat. And we learn that by how quickly he looks to blame him and label him a criminal for the crimes of Man-Bat. And we learn that Commissioner Gordon, on the other hand, doesn't want to judge or convict Batman without thorough evidence. We also learn that Gordon isn't afraid to stand against a fellow officer and detective to serve the greater good. This man doesn't blindly follow the law, he follows his moral compass. But most importantly, out of everything we learn that District Attorney Harvey Dent really likes flipping coins. I know that doesn't really sound important now, but it will be later on, I promise. In terms of Batman's rogues gallery, Man-Bat isn't an A-lister. I'm not even sure that he'd qualify to be a B-lister, maybe a C. They could have very easily started the show off with Batman facing the likes of the Riddler or the Joker, but they didn't. And there's probably a reason for that. The reason this works so much better as an introduction to the characters is because of the narrative that you can craft and create around this interaction. This was a very, very smart call. On top of that, the focus on Man-Bat allows the episode to showcase almost all aspects of being Batman. We get to see Batman as a crime fighter when he goes one-on-one with his polar opposite. We get to see Batman as a detective when he's trying to string together all these clues to figure out who Man-Bat is. We get to see Batman as a chemist when he creates a formula to cure Langstrom. And we get to see Batman as a savior when he carries and delivers a cured Langstrom back home. And we see Batman as a hero all throughout because of these things. Don't even get me started with the way the show built up the incredible Man-Bat reveal. First and foremost, I really appreciate that they didn't go the typical Scooby-Doo route. They coulda gone away with it. If it wasn't for that meddling... Oh, wait. The show wasn't holding your hand and walking you through the process. Hell, in actuality, they were trying to throw you off their trail. Throughout the episode, the plot is actively pushing the audience in the direction of Dr. March. The guy is mean-spirited and beyond defensive over nightly winged creatures. And when pressed on information on Man-Bat, he blatantly lies to Batman. Plus, look at him. Take a look at this guy. He has evil villain written all over him. But in actuality, he only serves as the red herring to the real culprit, Dr. Langstrom. But when I talk about the build-up to the reveal of Man-Bat, I'm not necessarily talking about who Man-Bat is, so much as I'm talking about what Man-Bat looks like. Throughout the episode, we're actually never shown Man-Bat until the very end of the episode. Throughout the show, the audience hears the character, and hears the damage the character does, but they're never specifically shown the character head-on. Even in the little glimpses we get of him, it's all in shadow, or the tip-top of the back of his goblin-like head. And I think that really adds to the audience's anticipation. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could get them ready for what they're about to see. Because when you finally see what kind of a hideous monster Dr. Langstrom is forcibly transformed into, holy crap, that's some beautifully animated nightmare fuel right there. It's like the PG version of American Werewolf in London. I can remember this sequence staying with me for years. This gave me actual nightmares, and it never once stopped me from watching it. I had never seen anything like it before, and while I have seen a bit like it now, I'm still thoroughly impressed nonetheless. That is some powerful stuff right there. I love the aesthetic of Gotham City. The reddish night sky, which a lot of fans contribute to the last season of the show, did in fact actually debut all the way back here, in the very first episode. Also established in this episode is the night sky blimps, because you can't have Gotham City if you didn't have parade floats in the skies. I don't know why they thought of doing that, but I'm really glad they did. It's a bizarre but very unique and fitting aesthetic. The animation is not only impressive for the time, but downright stunning now. Every action sequence feels well thought out and perfectly choreographed. I wish I could say more, but I think these visuals speak for themselves. They're honestly just beautiful. I like when we see Gothamites who are only around to set up the story. They still have some sense of personality. They feel like people in these situations, not cardboard characters only around to serve the temporary purposes of the plot. We get a quick, vague idea of who they are. I mean, I'm not writing the biography of Man Thrown Through Window number 1, but within a few seconds of screen time, I could tell you that this guy worked as a security guard and had a side hustle as a radio personality. I don't know his name, but I could tell you that about his life. I know, again, a stupid minor detail, but something that gives the show a little bit more personality and makes it feel, I don't know if real's the word, but maybe legitimate. There is so much to love about this episode, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's without its faults or hiccups. Like having Kevin Conroy voice nameless member of Sky Security? Really weird choice. I get that there was probably a budget and you don't want to bring someone else in to voice 4 lines of dialogue, but there really wasn't anybody else in the studio that day. The janitor couldn't have come in and said 6 words. Instead, we get our lead's very identifiable voice coming out of an NPC before he ever utters a word in the titular role. He doesn't even really disguise his voice either. I mean, if he's attempting to, then he's just not doing it well. I mean, sure, he doesn't sound like Batman here, but boy, that guy does sure sound like Bruce Wayne. In terms of voice actors, I didn't really love the voice actor for Alfred. It might be because I have a lot more nostalgia and fondness for the actor who would later take over the role, but I was just not a fan here. No disrespect intended to anybody. What he was saying wasn't the problem so much as how he was saying it. Like, the dialogue sounds authentic, but the voice itself feels forced.
I gather you've been reading How to Make Friends and Influence People.
Well, you'll be happy to know I've drawn you a bath.
I'll cancel Master Bruce's rendezvous with, Bambi, was it, sir?
I said I drew you a bath, sir.
Wayne Manor. One moment, please.
Sounds like a rather dirty April Fool's prank.
Dr. Langstrom didn't really have a whole lot of characterization. He was barely present, and while his reveal does create shock, I also feel like it falls a little bit short. The shock isn't that it's Dr. Langstrom, the shock is that it's not Dr. March. So if there was anything I can change, it would probably be this. It's just very much a non-factor that it's him. We meet him, and then 2 scenes later, he's Man-Bat. Even worse off is how rushed the scene feels. With no prompt other than Batman's mere presence, Langstrom goes on a full-blown supervillain monologue rant. Like, Batman didn't even suspect you in that moment, and then you just laid it all out on the table for him. Why? Who did that benefit? I also don't think this did a great job at clarifying where Kirk falls on the morality chart. Like, his backstory would make you think that he was a victim of his own actions, but then his campy, evil speech at the end really just throws me off. Like, I get it, it's the Beast taking over, but I never really thought of Man-Bat as a schemer. You know, I thought of him more as a agent of chaos, if you will. But here, Man-Bat is not only intelligent, he's highly intelligent. The thing knew what chemicals to mix to bring itself present. I guess I never realized that Man-Bat had such mental capacity. I didn't realize that he was intentionally evil. I thought that when he took a life, it was because he got hungry, and his only instinct was to survive. I just remember that outside of the scene, Man-Bat seemed more like an animal acting out than he did an animal capable of higher brain functions. Like, there was sentience, but there wasn't necessarily intelligence. I don't know, maybe I misjudged the character. I'm willing to believe that. That's entirely possible, but to my recollection, this seems to be the only time Man-Bat had a plan that was well thought out. You know, I think of Man-Bat as more Hulk and less Bruce Banner Hulk. And this isn't a dig or a put down to the episode at all, this is just an acknowledgement. I'm just putting it here because I didn't know where else to put it. But damn, Bruce was ready to risk it all for this woman until he found out she was married. I mean, sure, it was all business as soon as her husband walked in, but you could tell. Overall, this episode is a must-see for Batman fans because this is a classic. This is where it all began. This is the meet cute between the brand and so many future nerds. I really hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, there may be more on the way. If you like this video and want to see me review the rest of Batman the Animated Series, episode by episode, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying,
Hey, what's up, Doc?
and with all that being said, I was your least favorite YouTuber, Infuso, and I thank you for watching. Hope to see you in the next one.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.